Hey everyone, Stas Magic here. Let's talk about a process that's very near and dear to me growing up as a kid in the last crash that nobody talks about, that people don't quite understand the process of what it takes and how long it takes and what's entailed in the process of foreclosure. So in the last crash and then so on now, all the time, there's foreclosure processes starting in this country, and most people are just uneducated on what that process is and how they can save their properties, or at least their equity that everyone has a ton of right now. So let's talk about what happens in the foreclosure process in the United States. And every state has different rules and regulations and all sorts of different things. Like Minnesota's a cold weather state, so you can't get kicked out in the wintertime, things like that. But most of it is similar to how it runs and how it processes. So let's talk about it. So you own a property, you lose your job, spouse loses their job, partner loses their job, doesn't matter what the situation is. But if you stop making your mortgage payments within 3 to 6 months of getting letters and fines and late fees and whatever else, the bank will start what's called the foreclosure process. And what that does is, since they are in the first lien position or second lien position of your mortgage on your property that you signed, which the mortgage is your promissory note telling you that, hey, I promise to repay this mortgage on the property that I own, that I pay property taxes for, insurance for, and live in. So on your primary residence, that's what they'll do, is they'll start a foreclosure process 3 to 6 months into you missing your payments, which kicks off the foreclosure process. What that does is it will schedule what's called a sheriff sale. And a sheriff sale is something that when the bank that holds the mortgage goes out and says, hey, this is what's owned on this property, I'm going to sell this note. Most of the time, the bank purchases that note unless somebody outbids them. And then somebody can hold that note and say, hey, once this foreclosure process is done, and if it's not paid off, then I get this property at this price that's owed, plus fees and fines and all that stuff and interest that gets accrued. But right now, it's everybody in the United States, unless you pulled out second mortgages to buy cars, pay off credit cards, things along those sorts, most of the market, since the appreciation has been like this in the last 2 years, 3 years, most people have a lot of equity built up in their properties. So if you are in the foreclosure process, or even before that, well before is the best time to start, to go, hey, we can no longer afford this property. What we need to do is we need to sell it and then go rent somewhere or buy a smaller property. In that sense, start that process, call a real estate professional, call friends, call family, figure out what you need to do, and call your bank as well, because sometimes the bank will actually work with you to refi you, get you a low rate, which that has its own quirks and back ends, because a lot of times what they'll do is they'll lower your rate for a certain moment, and then they'll take all those extra fees and missed payments and they'll just put them on the back of the loan, or get a secondary loan that you'll have to pay off at the time that you sell your property. So make sure that as early as possible you start having conversations, meeting with real estate professionals, to make sure that if you are going to lose your home, if you can no longer afford your payments because of issues that have happened, divorce, death, job loss, millions of different things that can happen that can go wrong in home ownership, contact a real estate professional, get a CMA, which is a comparative market analysis, figure out how much your home is worth in the current market that it's in. And that way you don't have to have the credit hit that's gonna, foreclosures are about 7 to 10 years of credit hits, bad credit. It takes forever to rebuild. Your second option is a short sale. If you don't have that equity, you can work with the bank to say, hey, I'm gonna lose this property because I can't afford to pay it. I have more debt on this property than what the property is worth. So work with me on figuring out a balance of what you guys will take, and it's a smaller hit on your credit to do a short sale than it is to have a foreclosure. So what that means for you is It's a very tough situation. It's very delicate when you're dealing with the high stress of not being able to pay your bills, your mortgage, things along those sorts, with all those different issues that can happen. But if you want to protect yourself and protect your future in credit and not having the credit hits that it will affect you long term, start having the conversations early. Reach out. You can sell your property, you can rent your property out and have your mortgage covered by the renters if you want to become a landlord and then go live somewhere else. There's a ton of different options, a ton of different resources. But what a lot of people don't understand is, and it was the same thing when my parents went through it back in 2009, is, medical emergencies, job losses, business closings, things along those sorts. It makes it very tough to focus on all the different aspects when you are in complete fight or flight mode. So yes, I understand it's tough. I don't want anybody to go through it because it is not a great ride to get back out of that, especially when you can do a short sale, or you can just sell your property on the market retail, or you can rent it out, become a landlord, not lose your property, but have somebody pay that mortgage that you are no longer able to pay. Because if this economy continues going the way that it's going, there's predictions of job losses, layoffs, that these high interest rates, which hit like 6.5% today with perfect credit on your first residential home, that's going to make things tough. So make sure that you reach out as soon as possible and make sure that you know exactly and have somebody help you through the process that understands the process, that understands what goes into it, because you do not want that on your credit report. You do not want to go through it. So now let's talk about the entire process. So 3 to 6 months, they sell the deed to your property, the mortgage, the promissory note that you promised, whether the bank buys it back or somebody else comes in and buys it. And now they're holding this paper, which tells you that you have a certain amount of time now to either pay that off completely by refinancing, family, friends, whatever it is, taking money out of stocks, IRAs, whatever the situation scenario is. And then you have a certain amount of time, which in Minnesota it's 6 months, some states are 3 months, some states are a year, depending on how fast things get processed. Banks now do have a pretty good understanding of how it all works, so they have systems set up, unlike the 2008 crash, which they did not have a lot of systems, and some people were able to live in their homes for 2, 3 years, 4 years before the banks even realized that, hey, you haven't made a payment, because they were just so backlogged. But right now, with the equity that everyone has, the 3 to 6 months, and then you have to vacate the property. You have to give up the keys and everything else, and then all the money that you put down, all the money that you put into your property, all that goes away. So you do not want to lose that money, because it could set you up for the future, help you in the future, better your life, whatever it is. So make sure that no matter what is going on, you reach out to a realtor to figure out what the price of your property is, and if you can sell it on the regular market, or if you need to make a call to your bank and say, hey, I met with 2 realtors, 3 realtors, here's what my home is worth today in today's market, but here's what my loan balance is. So there's a gap. So that's a short sale. The short sale, the bank will cover that gap. You will have repercussions and whatever else. I won't get into legal about it. You'll have to talk to CPAs and lawyers on that stuff, because it's all changing and it's all working differently. But that gap may be forgiven. That gap may be put onto you as additional income, things along those. It's complicated. That's why you need to reach out to a professional. But make sure that you do not just go through the foreclosure process on your own and just let your house go. And then when the sheriff comes to kick you out on the last day, it can create shambles, especially for kids involved. Parents are living with you, whatever the situation is. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I am licensed in Minnesota and Florida. I've done a ton of short sales and a ton of foreclosures back in the days when they were there. So I understand the process. I know how it works. I talk to my attorneys all the time to make sure that the changing landscape is always updated and I know what's going on. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. All my info is in my bio. Otherwise, have an amazing day. And remember, don't lose your home to a bank. You have a lot of equity probably built up in your property. If you can't afford it, there are other options outside of foreclosure. Have an amazing day.